Hold on, let me get mine right.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you. We're just going to hold on a few minutes or so and let some people join, and then we'll get started. So we'll out, wait, and it'll be good. Yeah. Yeah, depending on time. Cool. Thank you for everyone who's joining us right now. We're just going to give it a minute or two, and then we're going to get started with our conversation about strengthening relationships. Great. Okay. Everyone looks so good. All right, one more minute, and then we're ready to get started. Just making sure it's all set. Okay. So we do have a good amount of people already joined on. So, just if we don't keep people waiting, it's 7 o'clock. Hi, everyone. My name is Veronica Lynch, and I am the Outreach Awareness Specialist for the Domestic Abuse Project of Delaware County. And tonight I'm joined by two great guests who are going to talk about our relationships outside of DAP. And, I will let Jordan introduce herself, and then we'll have Sergeant Mark introduce himself. So, Jordan, would you like to go ahead?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jordan Kelso. I'm the Manager of Advocacy Services for DAP. And I'm looking really forward to just talking about the different myths and challenges maybe police and victims face with DV calls. And I'm really happy to have Sergeant Mark on with us from Upper Chichester and let him introduce himself to you as well.
Perfect.
Okay, I guess that's my cue.
Yes.
Hi there. My name is Sergeant Mark, and I'm a patrol sergeant with Upper Chichester Township Police. I guess we'll just start off by saying, hey, thank you for having me. Domestic violence calls are probably one of the most common calls that we get in law enforcement. And I think it's a great thing to have this forum in which we can begin to dispel some of the myths. We can bring people up to speed on some of the challenges we face. And then we can really let people know how this is kind of a cooperative effort between, law enforcement, the DA's office, social services such as DAP. It's a big machine with a lot of moving parts, and the more people understand about it, I think the better off we'll be.
Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your night tonight to join us and have this conversation with not only, Jordan and I, but with everyone joining us as well. And so because we have such a great, conversation kind of lined up for today, Jordan, if you'd like, you can, start. If you want me to get started, that's okay too.
I can start. So I guess one of the first questions like we have are off the top of your head, what are your main challenges that you face?
As far as the overall, topic of domestic violence calls, I think the biggest challenge is just getting accurate information out to everyone so that they understand what services are available to them,
right,
what law enforcement can and can't do, and then what remedies they have available to them, whether it's through the legal system or whether it's through social services. And then I think probably one of the biggest challenges is that there's a lot of misinformation out there about what law enforcement can or can't do in cases of domestic violence.
Right.
Yeah, we hear that a lot as well. And I guess another thing would be what limitations exist when responding to a DV call?
Oh, wow. That's a huge question. There's a variety of limitations. I guess probably one of the best places to start is let's talk about what a typical DV call is for us. For those that are just sort of, new to this whole area of focus, DV is just our shorthand for domestic violence. So whether we're calling the issue domestic violence or intimate partner violence, we kind of default to acronyms, and that's DV. So I'm gonna, and I don't want to even guess at percentages, but I will tell you that the overwhelming a number of our DV calls that we get don't actually involve violence. They involve, well, problem solving, resolving squabbles, resolving serious problems, and then of course, dealing with, the physical conflict that can result from those things. The battered victim, with a shiner or worse is what everybody pictures when they hear DV. That's just not what we respond to most of the time.
And can something be done immediately? And is an arrest always required when dealing with DV calls?
Well, so let's go to that. So let's talk about the bulk of our calls. So the bulk of our calls really don't involve any kind of arrest at all. They involve very, very little, criminal prosecution. So when we talk about DV and we talk about criminal actions, we're talking about simple assault, we're talking about harassment, we're talking about recklessly endangering, maybe endangering the welfare of children, interference with custody of children. There's a variety of criminal activities that can go along with DV calls. Probably, the ones that everybody thinks of are the simple assault or, the physical harassment. Those are, the physical assault, that's, punching, certainly strangling. We've got a new strangulation statute, which is really powerful. Stalking, you see those kind of things. The bulk of them, though, if there's any criminal activity, usually it's, the pushy slappies that, you could probably call like physical harassment, and even classified as summary level. So those are still the small percentage of the domestic calls we go to. So in the event that we do arrive at a call where there has been criminal activity, we are empowered through Pennsylvania statute to make an arrest on view. We don't need a warrant to make an arrest. We would be relying on, again, like any arrest, with the existence of probable cause. But that can be determined through statements from participants. It can be determined through observations at the scene. It can be through testimonial evidence provided by third-party witnesses. All of those things. Let's face it, there's video cameras everywhere now. So a lot of times there's some video recording of something that went on. So those things could all amount to probable cause where we could make an on-view arrest for any of those criminal things that I mentioned earlier. That's still not what we do the most of. What we still do the most of is sort of calming everything down, getting everybody into, maybe their separate corners, and then really just trying to understand what's going on so that we can make referrals. And, DAP is one of the places that we make a great amount of referrals to. Does that answer your question, Jordan, about prosecution?
It does. And I guess one would, I don't know if you mentioned it and I missed it, but is an arrest always required?
No. So an arrest isn't always required. Number one, most of the time there's no criminal activity. If there is criminal activity, frequently it is of, we'll call it the lower severity. Maybe it is something that's as simple as a summary level harassment, which would be about the same criminal seriousness as say like public drunkenness or disorderly conduct. It would be classified as a summary offense. If we're going into the criminal realm, usually it's because of either a simple assault or some kind of stalking behavior, things like that. And those types of things we can make an arrest on view. Very small percentage of what we actually deal with would be cases where arrests are made. The thing that you said that was interesting, Jordan, was that is an arrest required in those cases? And the answer to that is no, it's not. So Pennsylvania law, and this is a misconception that we see often, Pennsylvania law does not require an arrest to be made in those types of things. Violations of protection orders, that's something different. But violation of the Crimes Code, no. We have the authority to arrest. Doesn't always mean that that's what is done.
So that definitely brings us to our next question, which is in this question, I know that I get all the time when I cover our hotline, is what would constitute court intervention? So, for example, we get a lot of people who call and say, I want my boyfriend to leave, but he won't leave. So she calls the police to have, you guys come out and take him. But if he lives in the home, it now becomes a civil matter. So can you kind of explain a little bit between what is in your, I guess, capacity to deal with, and civil versus criminal a little bit, mainly talking about custody and landlord tenant and housing. So those are the main issues that we hear a lot.
Okay. So important dividing line, civil versus criminal. So law enforcement for the most part deals just with criminal. We don't do much in the way of criminal. So the things that are civil issues would be, as you said, landlord-tenant issues, custody issues, things like that. So enforcement for those is going to go through the civil courts. Frequently we will have one of the parties that has taken up residence and established residence in the house. The other half wants them gone. They call the police. They say he's not on the lease. He doesn't live here. Well, not so fast. If he's established residency, now we need to look at something where it's an ejectment, which is, a court ordered, you don't live here, you need to go. But that's not something we can do. We would make a referral to, the civil courts for whomever wants whomever ejected. So that would be one thing that would be a court ordered remedy. It's not something that we can just decide, hey, you're out of here. Another thing would be custody. So very often we get one parent that is by right or by custom the custodial parent, but there is no custody order in place through the courts. So we will be called and somebody will say, well, I have custody. I don't want them to have the children. Okay, there's no custody order. That parent, that biologic parent, has just as much, right to have custody of the children. Now, I'm talking absent exigent circumstances. One of the parties is engaged in criminal activity, or they're, under the influence of alcohol or controlled substance, or, they're making bad choices. That would be something where we might say, yeah, safety is the issue right now. You're not taking the children. But custody issues by and large are decided by the courts, certainly not by us. One of the other things too is that unless there is specific wording in custody orders are not enforced by law enforcement. Those are enforced through the civil courts and by the sheriffs. So that would not be something we would enforce. That's a surprise to a lot of people too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
We do have a question from one of our viewers right now. They're wondering, do you find that most police calls in your district are domestic calls?
Most, no. A significant percentage
Okay.
are domestics. And the overwhelming tone of the domestic calls that we get is dispute resolution. It's not really, a scene of violence.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
And in your opinion, how can we build trust between police and victims of domestic violence?
Wow, that's a broad one too. So
yeah, let's keep it broad and let you come up with the answer.
Struggle with it.
Okay. I will tell you that I have had the best results when you take a very realistic, just problem-solving approach, where sometimes the best way to lead that discussion is just to flat out ask, okay, what do you want us to do for you tonight? Mm-hmm. And then based on their expectations, we can say, okay, there's no way I could possibly do that. Or, hey, rather than focus on what we can't do, here's what I can do. What you were specifically looking for may not be on our list of things we can do, but here is, what we can do for you. I think that's probably one of the biggest parts from our end that we can do to keep things working as smoothly as possible. From the other end, from the folks who are calling for service, probably the easiest way to work well with us is tell us the truth. Okay. All of it. Not a little kernel of truth here and then the rest is nonsense, or, there's a big part that's omitted. Mm-hmm. We understand that these are emotionally trying circumstances. We know that, this can involve children. We know this can involve betrayal. We know that there's a lot of, a lot of spark in a lot of the issues that lead to these calls. I think we've probably heard most, if not all, of the embarrassing things that could, ever come up in a domestic argument. So, we're not going to trade trust. You tell us what's going on honestly. We'll tell you what we can do honestly. And then when we do offer advice, when we do make suggestions, follow through. We're not talking just, you need to leave this guy and be done with him. I get that's easier said than done. But hey, if we refer you to DAP, call them. Right. If we are referring you to, hey, listen, there's all kinds of counseling available. There's legal aid available. There are all kinds of great things. Avail yourself of these services. We're not telling you about them just to hear ourselves talk. So check them out. And
if I could just kind of comment on your problem solving approach, that's very similar to what we do, right, with our empowerment model and, setting goals when we work with everything very much goal oriented to be what is best case scenario and how can we help you reach that. So I think it's interesting that we, that we have those similarities in our approaches and, and trusting our clients as well.
And I think collaboration between police departments and DAP is so important. Every time that a police officer refers a victim that they are they come in contact with to me, I always follow up. I try and provide them court accompaniment if that's the road it's taking. So I'm really excited to have future collaborations with more police departments in Delaware County. We're still reaching out to chiefs and trying to get them to meet with us. And I'm very grateful for the police departments that have set up meetings so far, but we have a lot more to go. So I'm hoping that we can very soon, because collaboration is very important. And again, I'm really happy that you're here as well. This shows how Upper Chi is working with us, and it's really important. So I know Veronica has a few more questions as well that a lot of victims asked us. So we do want to get to them.
Sure.
So our next question is, how can, we just talked about collaboration efforts and how they are right now. How can they improve? What has been some of the positives between these collaborations?
Oh, wow.
And do improvements, however you want to take it.
Sure. I will. So I've been doing this for a while, and I will tell you that the level of cooperation between the agencies and even the coordination between the agencies, let's face it, there's a lot of moving parts here. There's law enforcement, there's the DA, there's DAP, there is, the civil courts, there are the criminal courts. There's so many moving pieces. Today, we work better, I think, than we have at any point in my career with just coordination. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have known anybody's name or face with DAP. And, the few times that we made contact, it was a voice on the end of a phone. But the fact that we're doing things outside of provision of service, it just strengthens that working relationship. If I just have off-the-wall questions, I can call Jordan and say, hey, listen, I've got somebody that needs something that's a little outside your scope. Do you have an idea? And it's that kind of cooperative effort. Occasionally we run into, one thing about DV calls is that while the theme may be the same, all the little fact patterns are always different. And, I have DAs that I know, in Delco DA's office that I can call pretty much at any time and say, all right, I got a weird one. I want to run this one by you. Am I on the right track? Are we taking the right approach with this? From a procedural or from a legal point of view. And it's moving in the right direction. I think that the biggest thing is going to be the problem-solving approach. It's not all about getting there and locking somebody up. In fact, most of the time it isn't.
Right.
So it's, all right, it's 2:00 in the morning. What are we trying to accomplish? Well, we don't want anybody to get hurt. We want this to stop now. we don't want to leave and have it rekindle in a few minutes. So what are we going to do? And it's that, are you willing to leave for the night? Hey, do you need a ride somewhere? All right, everybody's been drinking. Do you need a lift to the hotel? Or, can I take you to a parent's house? There's so with that problem approach, we're building in what we'll call an element of flex on everybody's part. Law enforcement just doesn't walk in and go, here's how it is, get out. The people that we're working with, maybe they're learning to compromise a little bit so everybody gets a little piece of what they want that night. I think that's really where this is going to start to move in a good direction. Does that make sense? Or does that answer your question?
Definitely. And I guess what I left hearing was that aspect of safety planning, like with, where you get the calls and everything, which I think is something that, we always it's part of my job is to talk about safety planning with everyone when we do presentations and everything. So if anyone ever has any questions, they can always call our hotline, or whoever is the same person and you want to talk about safety planning, do it there too. But thank you. I think that's great information.
So, and actually you bring up a great point with safety planning. Involve us, the law enforcement, in safety planning. I mean, that's our wheelhouse. So, and different geographical areas may have different I won't say safety issues, but different nuance to their ability to do safety things. The way that you may plan safety for somebody who happens to travel to the state of New Jersey may be different than somebody that stays in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So, involving your cops with that may provide, some aspects or some answers to some things that you hadn't considered.
No, definitely. And I guess that kind of segues into the second part of this is, how can our agency support law enforcement with calls? How can we make sure that information and resources are as accessible as possible for not only law enforcement officers, but for the people that we serve? So
I think you're on the right track now. We've talked about, lethality assessment protocol training, on an ongoing basis for law enforcement. That's great because that gets you guys into the arena with your cops. And that's how you develop those face-to-faces. That's how your cops go, hey, I know there's somebody that I can call that may have some answers that I just don't have. So, building those coalitions up front, I think, is really important. And then your first port of contact with DAP is whoever answers that phone. Yeah. So involving, if you can get some of your call takers that might show up at some of these law enforcement trainings so they can hear what we're saying. Hey, I made this phone call, didn't exactly answer my question. Is there other stuff that you have that could be helpful? Here's what we're faced with. So maybe just having, because if we draw a parallel, our emergency services dispatchers, they know what we do because to some degree, we cross-train. All new cops go to the radio room and learn how the dispatchers do their thing. If we could do something maybe similar with the call takers, and I'm calling them call takers, I don't even know that that's the right term for them, but the folks that answer the phone on your hotline.
Right.
That would be great to get them involved.
I think that's really important as well, because Jordan and I are some of the people who take hotline calls.
Yeah.
So that makes it kind of, we can be there, and we'll also be the people doing the lab trainings and things like that. So we will be the ones continuing to partner. So I think that's a great perspective to add, and make sure that we're bringing that everybody's as understanding of each person's perspective. That way, when we are helping clients together, we understand this is where we're coming from. This is what we're both trying to do. How can we achieve our goals in a way that is productive and is, like we said, victim serve first, because that is our first, goal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think, I'm sorry, Jordan, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I'm looking forward to the upcoming lethality assessment training that we're doing on April 14th. Just recognizing a few of the departments that signed up, which are Upland, Radnor, the Chichester officers is attending as well. And our April training is full, which, is very exciting. very exciting. We still have May and June available, so we'll be sending them out to the different departments soon. And I'm hoping that we do continuous lap trainings to eventually get, a majority, if not all, of police departments in Delaware County to be lap trained. And it's another way, like you said, to collaborate and to work together. And I think it's going to be a great experience on April 14th to see how our first lap training goes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And we're gonna have a big room.
Yeah.
We've got a big crowd. Okay.
Yep.
I think one of the other things, and I've seen this across the board with victims of DV. I know victim's not the chic term, but that's kind of how we look at it. Is information along the lines of, hey, this is how it happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
And, that does a few things. Some people, it wakes them up to the idea that, hey, you're in a bad situation. Denial is a powerful tool, and there's a lot of people that just won't admit that things are really bad. Hearing from others, I've seen other people that were in those same situations recognize how bad theirs really was by hearing the stories of others.
Mm-hmm.
One of the tools that you use is Leslie Morgan Steiner's TED Talk. For those of you that don't know, she wrote a book called Crazy Love, where she details not only her personal experiences with domestic violence, but addresses some of the issues that law enforcement deals with all the time. Probably the first and foremost is, why does she stay? When I went to the police academy, it was a while ago. It was after horses, but it was before automatic pistols. So it's been a few years. The prevailing theory in law enforcement was first time's his fault, every other time's hers. And, we know a lot better now that that's just not the case. Not only because, DV affects everyone, regardless of gender or how they identify, but it also is one of those things we know that, we know through victimology that it's not as easy as just saying, why are you still here? There's a lot that goes into that. And, just that roughly 20-minute video, 20-minute video, that she has put out there is so valuable that, things like that, getting information like that out there is super important. And I think including it in the law enforcement training is a big deal.
Right. Right. I think that's a great point. That's, especially I think even acknowledging the past views on domestic violence that law enforcement may have and seeing the growth now is very, we all should be reflecting on what maybe we have done that hasn't helped. So I think that's great information for everyone to hear today. And I think that makes a lot of people feel better, understanding that the efforts are being made to change perspectives and to always grow and learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I said, brings us to our next one of what are some stereotypes and myths that you're aware of when responding to DV calls?
Wow. Okay. So let's see.
Well, we already tackled the one is that an arrest is always required.
Yeah.
That's definitely,
The other thing is how we decide who we arrest. The popular myth is that if the other person has marks on them, you're getting arrested. And that's not the case. That may be part of the evidence that we observe, and it could certainly be part of our group or part of our fact pattern that would amount to probable cause. But that in and of itself doesn't necessarily dictate who would be arrested. There's a popular belief that the guy always gets arrested.
Right.
Not true either.
Yeah.
The unlawful combatant would be the one that would get arrested.
Gotcha.
There's some people that think that if they fight back, they may have trouble with us too. Nothing could be further from the truth. Without knowing the ins and outs of a particular circumstance, I can't say for certain, but you will not hear us say that you have to sit there and be a punching bag for somebody. You're allowed to use force to defend yourself. It's perfectly acceptable. That would be one. Let's see some of the other myths. We hear some strange ones sometimes. Everybody thinks that if there is a DV incident in the house that we are going to come and take the children physically and hand them over to CYS.
Mm-hmm.
It does not work that way.
Okay.
So, if you were having a domestic violence issue and you were worried that we're going to come take your kids, unless the kids are, victims of abuse or something totally off the wall, we would not do anything like that.
That's a great point to bring up, because that's actually a big, reason people won't call.
I was going to say that too. I get that all of the time. All of the time. That's such a huge concern. Yeah.
I think that's great for people to hear.
You're using alcohol or drugs. Honestly, in that context, we don't care. We're not, okay, you have a drug problem. We can point you in the right direction for that. We can recommend places where you can talk to people. That's not our concern. Our concern in a DV call is making sure that everybody's okay, that when we leave, everybody's going to stay okay. And then if there are any, actionable violations of the law, that, we would look at doing some sort of enforcement action, and then getting people the right help. Because let's face it, DV is not solved by us in 5 minutes. These things have been brewing for years, in these relationships. And we're not going to fix in 5 minutes what it took people, years to create.
Yeah.
So those are some of the big ones.
Yeah, definitely. I think those were important to bring up and to acknowledge. And this kind of leads into our the next question, which is like, how can we, right, with all our collaborations and partnerships, also support law enforcement officers who might find themselves in DV relationships?
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing. There's nobody that is listening to our voices right now that does not know somebody who has been either a victim or a doer. For DV. Everybody knows somebody who's involved in it. And guess what? Everybody knows a cop or two. I don't think that law enforcement is any more that's probably another good myth to bang up. Okay. I don't think law enforcement is any more prone to being a DV victim or DV offender than any other section of the population.
Okay.
If that were the case, we'd be going to more cops' houses, I think. Okay. I think it's pretty evenly distributed across the board. Same thing with drug dependency and stuff like that. It affects every race, every gender, every orientation, every socioeconomic class. DV really is no different. I think.
Is there like something? Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off. No, I was going to say, if a police officer were to find themselves as a victim in a DV case, is there anything specifically that you can think of that would help us help them? Is there any
I don't know that honestly, I can't think of anything that would be special. I mean, there may be some stigma attached to I'm a cop. How the hell did this happen to me?
Right.
And I know a few people that have been in that situation and they have expressed that. I think the biggest thing is just, if we have understanding in law enforcement about victimology of DV, we're probably better able to support our and let's face it, mostly sisters, but a brother or two along the way. That would probably go a long way, is just having a better understanding of the victim's end of it, no matter what their vocation is.
We actually we spoke with an amazing survivor. She is incredible. Her name's Demi Moore. She's been on our Facebook Lives and has collaborated with us a lot. And she was actually a state trooper. So, and she found herself as a victim of domestic violence. So she shares that perspective. And but with her story, she actually never reached out to any police or anything like that to get involved. It's really tricky. You can find all these videos on our YouTube, but the abuser was actually also another police officer. So it was a whole thing that was very complicated, but I just think it's great to always hear those perspectives and break down those stereotypes and myths that people might find or think of when they think of or come across law enforcement.
So we can probably make it less complicated to come forward, I think, if we just understand, what DV victims or what makes DV victims reluctant to come forward. If we understand that, we can, look at those in law enforcement. or counselors or, anyone in the field, and understand that their coming forward might be a little more difficult based on what they do for a living.
Yeah. And we actually had a question from a viewer who asked, do you feel that domestic calls are the most unpredictable calls that you receive?
Every call is unpredictable. So sometimes DV calls are super predictable. All right, it's going to be this because of this, and nobody's going to want to cooperate with children. But if they want to chill down, some people don't. I wouldn't say they're any more unpredictable than any other calls. Is the potential for violence high at any call where emotions are running high? Yeah, absolutely. And can a call go from chill to explosive in a second? Absolutely. But any place emotions are running hot, yeah, you can have bad outcomes.
Great, thank you.
All right. I guess our last question for you. What is the message you would like to leave with the community?
If you are a person involved in a DV relationship, no matter which side of the equation you're on, go talk to somebody and get help. Your situation is, you may think it's unique. You may think there's nobody that can help you. You may think it's so awful you have to cocoon yourself, and just deal with it. It's not true. There's a lot of people out there that have dealt with the same thing. Go talk to somebody. Call DAP. Talk to a friend. Talk to a counselor. Talk to a priest. Talk to somebody that you can just talk to. There's 1-800 numbers everywhere. They will do it anonymously. If you run into good cops that are in tune to what's going on, they are not going to push you in one direction or another. They will lay your options out for you. They may strongly stress that you do one thing or another, but for the most part, they are not going to make decisions for you. And, they're going to try to put you back in control. So talk to somebody. If you have nobody to talk to, call 911, ask for a phone call back from a cop. You can stay anonymous and you can say, hey, what should I do? We'll talk to you.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I did put our 24/7 hotline in the chat for anyone who, has any questions. That number is 610-565-4590. But, like I said, even if it's just a question that you have, or, you just want to talk for a little bit, you can always call us. We are 24/7 and we'll always pick up. There is the National Domestic Violence Hotline. If you would like, another resource to go to, there is a domestic violence agency in every county of Pennsylvania. So there are, there are resources available and people who are going to listen. Mm-hmm. So thank you so much. Thank you.
One final thought. One of the most valuable things that I think was said in that Leslie Morgan Steiner TED Talk was domestic violence can only exist in the dark corners. Talk about it, gets it out into the light. Once it's out into the light, it can't exist. So make sure you get it out there and talk to somebody. We'll help you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sergeant Mark, for joining us tonight. Jordan, is there anything that you would like to end our live with tonight?
No, I think that quote was a really good end point. Thank you. And again, thank you, Sergeant Mark, for coming on and spending, close to 40 minutes with us. We really appreciate it, and helping answer some questions that I know I get a lot, and I know a lot of our hotline and counselors get them a lot. And I hope that this Facebook Live got to some people who may have had those questions, and we're able to just, reach them on a broader scale with this. So.
And I hope everyone enjoys their night, and good night.
Thank you.
All right. Will do. Have a good night, ladies. Thank you.